Hello, friends. Okay, so I have finally finished watching volumes 1 and 2 of season 5, and I have a lot of thoughts, feelings, opinions, and I'm going to talk about them. I kind of feel like before the finale drops, I wanted to just like get my thoughts out on paper, video. Where are we? Anyway, um, because potentially I might be wrong, but potentially I might be right, and I really want to have evidence that I was right. And if not, I'll delete this from the internet. Probably won't. I'll leave it up. Uh, but I actually think I know there's a lot of people who watched Volume 2 particularly and thought that this was like clear sign Byler isn't happening. And I disagree. And I'm going to go through why. But I actually think that pretty much uh, I kind of still agree with what I said in the first video that I made, if you've seen that. That like narratively, just so much of this stuff doesn't make sense if we don't end up with Byler at the end. Um, like I just think there's a lot of choices that are being made here that if Byler doesn't happen, you just go, why? Like, why would you make those choices? And I think that some of you have not lived through this sort of queer baiting stuff before, and I tell you, this is different. I feel like this is quite different to queer baiting shows that I've seen in the past. And I just, you know, I maybe disagree a little with myself last time where I said, the Duffer Brothers are amazing writers. I do think they're great writers. Volume 2 is a little shaky. Volume 1 and 2 is a little shaky. Season 5, but I do still think that this stuff is being done on purpose. So let's talk through it. So this is going to be kind of semi-structured, but again, I'm going to try and just like look at my notes a little bit, but mainly just talk to camera and not edit it. So it is also going to be a bit honest. And yes, sometimes I might get a little bit annoyed because I am very tired of watching the same queer tropes get defended as like realism when literally every other trope in the show gets subverted and straight people always win. So let's go. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about Elle and Mike. We talked about that a little bit, as I said in the last video. But I think that it is even more clear to me in this season that Elle and Mike are not going to be together. And in fact, I don't think that they're together at all this season. And we can kind of talk about that a little bit later. But at a structural level, Elle's focus this season is very much like about her family. So it's not about Mike. It's about Hop and her sister. And look, we can argue if we think that that is a good choice or not. I personally have been like finding the scenes with Hopper really hard to get through. He's really annoying me this season anyway. But it's about family. It's about her like sense of selfhood. It's about power. When you really think about it, I mean, she and Mike have barely been together all season. There's no emotional spine there. They haven't kissed once. I think if the show wanted to reinforce Malevolent as like Endgame, then they would have to be putting that stuff in place during the season for it to make sense. There would need to be that kind of screen time, intimacy, and conflict in the relationship. There's no conflict, so there's nothing to kind of. There'd be no reason for there to be like an Endgame moment between them because there's no conflict between them. So narratively, that makes sense. And there's also been no kind of emotional intimacy to be like, this is the thing that's keeping me strong. Like, there's none of that. So there's no reason narratively to push Malevolent as a final end game point, I don't think. And yeah, so they're not doing that. And Elle's character development, I feel like this has been happening kind of for quite a long time. Like maybe at least since season 3, that Elle's character development kind of keeps on happening away from Mike. All of the stuff that happens to her where she like grows as a person, whatever happens away from Mike. And I think that alone should give people a bit of pause about whether Malevolent is going to happen or not. And so I think this is also why people are kind of missing the forest for the trees when they say, well, Mike said he loved her in season 4. Because again, we haven't kind of had anything continue, like there's been no continuation of that into season 5 for there to be any importance like laid on that narratively. And I think that Mike lied a lot in that love confession. Um, he didn't love her straight away. That just isn't true. Um, he was a cranky little shit on her bad days. The idea that he like loved her on her bad days, we had like just seen one of her worst days where she smacked Angela up the head with the roller skate, and he was a dick. He wasn't like being very loving to her then. So I don't think that that speech is a very clean emotional truth. Plus, all the stuff about it being like paralleled to Will and having Will kind of haunting the love confession. It's a retroactive rewrite, if anything, of how he feels. I just personally think that like I think he loves her. I don't think he's in love with her, and I think the show knows that. And I think that if you don't know that as the audience, and by this I mean by you I mean the Malevins, then I think that you just don't necessarily have very good media literacy. Sorry about it. And again, like I say, I love Elle, and I actually really liked Maleven, as I said in the first video. I thought they were really cute, but I do think that from season 4 we see as much as you can say like yes, if you have a very surface level reading of it, it would be like, yeah, they're in love. That was not my takeaway at all. So that brings me to, if the Duffers wanted to shut down Byler, which people are saying that they do for whatever reason, they would have done that early and not just through interviews and stuff, because like interviews you cannot take to mean anything. Interviews are, people are going to like try to misdirect you. They are going to not, they're not going to tell you what is going to happen in the storyline, right? There'd be no point in doing that. It would just like take away from any twists that they wanted to use. And yeah, they're not going to do that. So you can't look at interviews and things like that for whether or not these sorts of things are happening. You have to look at the actual script. And in terms of like just television literacy, if they wanted to shut down Byler definitively, they would have done it much, much earlier. You don't keep that kind of unresolved romantic tension alive for 5 seasons unless it's going somewhere. Uh, and especially not in a show that is this intentional with the parallels, with the callbacks, the motifs, and like slow burn payoff. And especially not with queer tension, because that is just cruel. And I know that there's a lot of people who think that like there's just a, I don't know, that people are reading too much into it by seeing this stuff. But we all know the Will is gay. We know that he is in love with Mike. And it very easily could have been that in season 4, like the end of season 4, or even the very beginning of season 5, it would have been made, if it had been made really, really clear, and Will came out to Mike and he told him that he loved him and it was shut down, I wouldn't have been a huge fan of it. But like just from a perspective of like, you know, making sure that people weren't feeling like taken along for a ride, uh, it would have made more sense. And I just think that like if there was really a thing about wanting to shut down this idea that Byler would get together, they would have done it much earlier and they would have done it much clearer. And they haven't done that, which is why I personally think it is still alive. And we also need to remember that the Duffers have explicitly said that one of their favourite ships is Korosami, which is, of course, a couple who got together in like the final seconds of the final episode. And I have many, many thoughts on Korosami as well, and I would like to do a video on them at some point if that's not a completely dead in the water thing, but what a great show. Um, but yeah, like when people say like there's not enough time or they would have done it already, I'm like, have you watched television? Have you watched their stated reference point? Like, I'm predicting that that is going to be the exact structure we're going to get. We're going to have in the finale, it'll finally all come out, and it will be in the final moments that we will have Byler come true. Okay, now let's talk about Will. The van scene from season 4 is still doing a lot of heavy lifting for me. If Will and Mike don't end up together, why make Will in love with him and not just have like a crush? Because if we're being given that kind of level of like emotional clarity, longing, queer pain, why not let it stay vague and kind of like adolescent, just, crush level? Because then it's dismissible. Then it's something where it doesn't feel as hard to be like, he's just his Tammy or whatever. If it was a crush, sure, I could see that. But Will has been in love with Mike since season one, and he's in love with him. This is not just a crush. Like, uh, yeah, and more importantly, Will hasn't actually been rejected yet. So, like, yes, maybe it will happen. I think it would be really, really terrible writing, but it might happen. Um, all of the people who are saying like, "Oh, Mike's rejected him during that coming out scene," no, he hasn't. Will self-rejected himself. He's decided that Mike is his Tammy out of fear, I think. And it's an internalized rejection. It's not narrative rejection. Mike hasn't even said anything to him. I know that the Duffers did say that Mike has like realized during that scene that Will has a crush on him or is in love with him. Um, and it's so interesting to me that everyone was like, well, this is such a clear sign that, Byler bones, whatever, which I was going to go into later, but like, I will just say now, I, I know like it's been a little while since I've been in kind of ship war spaces, I suppose. Um, but like going online and having a look at some of the kind of Byler videos and whatever, and like I, trained my algorithm to be all about Byler on TikTok for a little while there. Um, it is really bizarre to me seeing the like ship war stuff. And I know that a lot of these people saying this stuff are kids, and so I'm kind of trying to keep that in mind. But there's this like very nasty, like very, very nasty kind of like uh way that people are talking to each other about it. And I'm just like, oh, I don't remember if this was like the case with any of the like ship war stuff that I had been involved in years ago. Um, I mean, I suppose it was never really, yeah, I don't know. Like, I know people can get nasty online about this sort of stuff, but like, holy homophobia, Batman is wild. Um, it's just like the kind of gleefulness that people have about being like, you fucking stupid queers, like, as if you think that like any of this is going to happen, idiots. It's just like, ugh, yuck. Anyway, um, go through that later. But I think, as I say, um, this idea that like Will has been rejected by Mike, it's an internalized rejection. It's not narrative. It's not real. Mike hasn't rejected him yet. That distinction matters a lot. I have also been wondering if whatever he saw in like Vecna's mind when they like, you know, when Vecna was like pushing him out, if he saw a vision, well, he did, right? Because that's during the coming out scene. He says that like he saw what would happen, and that's why he felt like he had to come out. Which, oh my god, we'll talk about the coming out scene later. But um, I wonder whether I think we'll find this out. Like we'll see it in the finale. Um, I reckon what happened was, I mean, I'm seeing so many like it parallels here. Actually, it's been really interesting. Um, but I reckon that probably what Vecna did was like show him Mike rejecting him, and that it was like such a horrible rejection that he has been like, oh, yeah, like it's done. Because, like, before all of this, and we're going to go kind of episode by episode a little bit, but like, Will was like looking for signs. He was talking to Robin about like what to look for. There was a sense of kind of hopefulness about the potential for something and the potential for Mike to like him back. Why would he do that if he felt like it was a completely hopeless thing? And why, after like a lifetime of being in love with you, like just suddenly decide that there's no possibility of this happening? And the timing is a little suspect. Like it's just after you've had the big bad in your head who is really good at working on shame and all the things like the most terrible fears that you have about like the things that you hate about yourself. And I just feel like very clearly I'm betting that we're going to see the vision and we'll see that Mike rejected him really painfully, and that actually the narrative hasn't closed the door, Will has closed it himself. Um, and then I think we'll see Mike opening it. the closet door. And then I think going kind of into that a bit, the show also does something quite interesting with giving us these tools to use as we watch. And I will mention that I do think that this season in particular, I mean, I kind of noticed it a little bit last season too, but it has really been spoon feeding a lot of information in a way that I find pretty painful. But um, there are still signs, I think, of them like kind of doing what they've done in the past of like using more kind of interesting parallels and like good, just good writing, really. And so I'm hoping that what this is like they've got the kind of Netflix audience spoon feed you every single thing and like have 7 scenes where they're like, now if this record player is Will and this is the record case is his body. Oh my god. I think also they have that level for the people who are watching on their phones, and then they have the deeper level for people who like to go crazy red string theory. Um, but it gives us these tools. Why are we given a list of signals to look for in terms of interest if that isn't going anywhere? Like, we get very specific ones to look for. We get, like, my hypothesis is that we're going to get the brush of the knee, a bump of the elbow, a shared look, and then something to make it much more clear. So it's like set up very clearly. So, which to me like also raises the bigger question of like, why subvert every other trope in the show except for Will's? I mean, we've seen Nancy and Jonathan have broken up, which, oh my god, thank god. Like, not necessarily the breakup, but thank god he didn't actually propose to her. I was like watching that episode where he had the ring, and I was like, oh my god, Jonathan, please do not propose to Nancy in this. Oh my god, awful. So yeah, like, loved that. Great scene. Loved that they like still love each other, and that it was just like a and also loved that it like didn't end in the like triangle. She also isn't in love with Steve because like that, yeah, it's like a subverting the love triangle trope because they love to subvert. They love to subvert. And I mean, like they love flipping expectations. I mean, canonically, Steve, beautiful, popular, the hair Harrington Steve gets canonically no bitches anymore. And the Duffers, like, they really said fuck stereotypes, but suddenly, like, this is where the realism kicks in. The gay kid just like suffers quietly and dies alone, learns to love himself alone forever. No, I just don't believe it. Byler forever. Okay, and also, speaking of the van scene, kind of a little bit a while ago, the painting reveal still hasn't happened yet. That is not a loose end. There is going to be the reveal. We're going to come back to that. It's going to be part of the proper conversation with Mike, I think. And then also, there's like the recurring motif of like, blank makes you crazy, love makes you crazy, crazy together. Byler, crazy together. Am I crazy? Maybe I'm crazy. Byler's real. Okay. All right. Now, I did make some notes as I watched, so I'm just going to go through my like Byler specific notes for each episode. I don't know if this is going to really work, but we'll try. So, episode 1, there wasn't really all that much. Episode 2, we just had that first conversation between Will and Robin, and I was just noting that I felt like I was really looking forward to Will and Robin talking about being gay. And I note now, I think, like, that I finished, that Robin is like very important this season to Will's arc, not just as like queer representation and having like, a queer elder to help you along and to like, make him feel safe about himself and all that kind of stuff. Great, important, very cool, love it. But I think also as a parallel to Mike with her relationship with Vicky and her relationship with Tammy, and I think a way to misdirect the audience. She's a red herring, guys. So ep 3, we have the proper Will Robin conversation, like, were we talking about signals? Um, Again, as I said, why would you need to set up the explicit signals to look for unless we, the audience, are going to be looking for those explicit signals to know when someone is interested? Exactly. And then I don't know if I am going into, so this is kind of, I'll talk a little bit about what happened in the final episode of volume 2 back to here, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm gone crazy with this, but I just think it's interesting that like snowball into an avalanche to describe the feelings. I was like, first in the moment when I was watching episode 3, yeah, I was like, is that a reference to the snowball? Like, are we going to go back to that moment when Mike was watching Will go off and dance with the girl, and he's like framed within like the same frame and with the same look on his face as Dustin, who is watching Max and Lucas go off and dance together, Max being his crush. I just think that that could be interesting. I think we might. And then the other thing was, and this is sort of, this is the bit where I'm like, I'm going everywhere a little bit with this, but the the Butthole Surfers song that Mike puts on in episode 7, is that the final one? There's, first of all, there's the line in that song is, they were drinking from a fountain that was pouring like an avalanche coming down the mountain. So I, I think the avalanche thing is going to be referenced. So we have the fact that Mike is the one who puts that song on. Robin mentions the snowball into an avalanche to Will, so I think that that's one connection there. And then I also have a feeling there's the line. This isn't a Byler thing specifically, maybe, but I have a feeling that that line, another Mikey took a knife while arguing in traffic, is going to happen. I think Mike is going to get stabbed in the finale, and I also wonder about the chorus of the song. I don't mind the sun sometimes, the image it shows. I can taste you on my lips and smell you in my clothes. Cinnamon and sugary and softly spoken lies. You never know just how you look through other people's eyes. And because that song is about like high school friends, um, people that you know from high school like dying. Um, and I don't think it's specifically, I mean, I don't think it is a love song, but I think that they'll kind of like take some of this stuff together. And I mean, there is the like, can taste you on my lips and smell you on my clothes does seem like romantic to me. Um, but I think the important line is, there's like, you never know just how you look through other people's eyes. I think we're going to see Will through Mike's point of view and realize that Mike has always been in love with Will, and that Will just never knew how he was like perceived by Mike. And particularly because of, and we'll talk about it later, but the scene where Will like gets his magic powers and we see for a moment through Mike's eyes. We'll talk about that in a bit because I think that is a very interesting scene. And I also need to say this because I've been seeing it online a lot, and I know, once again, like, is this that thing of, um, like people being funny about Noah, and look, not saying, I'm as anti-Zionist as they come, like free Palestine, but like I anyway, I'm not arguing. I don't even know like if he is actually like a Zionist or like whatever that is, but I do wonder sometimes like if this stuff gets a bit like, if people just like don't like him and then they are like making kind of shitty comments about his acting. But I've been seeing a lot of people commenting about his acting during this season in particular and saying it's like really terrible. And I really disagree. I mean, I think there are plenty of actors and plenty of moments in the script itself and the direction choices that I think we can call out, and that I think we could say are like not particularly good. Um, but I think like, particularly for a child actor, I think Noah is good. I think that scene with him and Joyce in season 3, in episode 3 in particular, was really lovely, and I think he does a really great job. I think he like does a really nice like mix of sort of, humor and uh seriousness, and like, yeah, I know, I mean, he does always do that like thing, which I find a little annoying, but I think he's a good actor. I think he's very sweet and funny, and I love him. So get off his back, okay? Leave Brittany alone. Okay, episode 4. First of all, this is not really related, but I did feel like I needed to bring it up. But I'm sorry, did Will just paint like a massive vagina on the wall? Because that looked like a massive vagina. And they're like, I don't know, I just know it's important to him. Me too, Henry. Me too. And then obviously the like, personally I like Dick, and then Mike and Will looking at each other. That's not subtle. That's not subtle, guys. It's flirt framing. Mm-hmm. And then we get this. People need someone to believe in them, then they can do amazing things. And then you smash cut to Will and Mike. That's obviously going to mean something. So then, obviously, yes, you have the conversation between the two of them with Robin watching. And I do think it's quite interesting. Like, yes, you could argue that they're setting Robin up as thinking, oh God, the poor gay kid, what with his like unrequited crush. First of all, like, come on, please, let's not do that. But also there's like the signal tower scene, explicitly about signals, shot with this like very kind of whimsical, hopeful tone. I like, it doesn't look to me like Will is going, oh, I'm not getting any reciprocal signals here. I think either Robin doesn't actually think that Mike is her Tammy. Also, is his Tammy, I should say. Also, Robin doesn't know Mike. Like, she doesn't know how he would be acting if he had a secret gay crush. So, like, just chill out, Robin. Also, she might not actually think that. But if she does, I think she's wrong. And yes, initially, her speech did make me a little bit worried. They're like, it was always just about me. I had all the answers. I just needed to stop being so goddamn scared of who I really was. And I was like, oh, God, yeah, they are going to push like a Will self acceptance arc. Fuck that. I'm like, I'll have my little rant here, but I am so sick of the trope where the queer kid like falls in love with his straight best friend, gets rejected, and the happy ending is just like learning to be alone. But he gains a new understanding of himself. But he's alone forever because gay people don't deserve happy endings. Gay people are allowed relationships. We are like social species. We are little animals who like to hang out with each other and do the do. And learning to love yourself does not require doing it in isolation. And in fact, I would argue that it is the opposite, particularly when being gay, the idea that you would like, you have to come to terms with yourself and like learn to love yourself around the fact that you are gay, which is about loving others. Being gay is about loving someone else. But the only way that you can do that is by being like, I am okay with being gay as long as I never act on it. Homophobia, no. I will be really mad if that is the route that we take. I just am like, the idea that Will is like giving his power away by loving someone, hate it. But I actually think that that is not what's going to happen. I also think that it's a weird scriptwriting choice, or a very intentional scriptwriting choice, to place people need someone to believe in them right next to you just need to believe in yourself. The ideas are in tension, and the tension, I think, maybe will be intentional. So I think that it's like, yes, first step, Will believes in himself. He can like learn to love himself separate to his crush. And then he is believed in by others, that is by Mike. And then that will be the way that he like saves the day, gets his powers, because we will have a love confession or something. I just think the idea that like Will comes into his power by like being rejected is a pretty shitty take, and I would really hate it if that happens. But this brings me to the magic reveal in Ep 4, and I, as I wrote in capital letters in bold, changed my mind. Will's magic reveal is absolutely a Byler moment. His powers activate when Mike is in danger. The memories that make Will strong are initially related to Mike. Then the reaction shots of his powers begin with Mike, followed by, before moving to Joyce, Lucas, and Robin, we have Mike reacting. First of all, how is Mike reacting to this? Mike is the one who, like, I just think that if Will was being like, I'm just going to come into my powers by only just being happy with myself, but then the first thing that like makes him the happiest and that like brings him into his power is like meeting Mike and hanging out with Mike and playing D&D together. Also, the fact that and I hope this is okay for me to say, because again, I'm like, how old is Noah Schnapp? I think he's like 25. Is that right? I'll have to look it up. If he's younger than that, I'll be like mortified. But he like has always been kind of, like he's not someone who I think he's like a very, handsome boy, but he's not like, I mean, I'm gay, so I don't find him like particularly attractive, but he looked hot as fuck in that scene where he gets his powers. Like he's suddenly all like wiping his nose and he looks all buff and, he looks hot. I think very clearly Mike agrees. Honestly, the most emotion that he's shown all season, God bless him. And crucially, I think that we are seeing Will from Mike's point of view in that shot. Slow motion, like the lights going off behind, in like bokeh as we zoom in on Mike's expression. That's crush framing, girl. And like, what did Robin say in that conversation where she was talking about Tammy? Time slowed down when I saw her. Mike is in love with Will. Just saying. Okay, episode 5. Now, the conversation with Robin is really just about coming out, but the mention of moving from Tammy to Vicky could be important. I think it'll be like Will thinks Mike is his Tammy, and then in volume 3, I think he'll actually talk to Mike about the painting and his crush, and we'll realize that Mike is Vicky, not Tammy. Also, the like conversation with Steve and Dustin where and I mean, I know that Steve and Nancy don't get together, but like we know that Steve is in love with Nancy at this point. Like Nancy is a friend, she's a friend. It's like still that parallel to Mike and Will in season 4 of like, we're friends. Denial language, classic. Episode 6, I didn't really have heaps, but that like Mike talking to Elle, this is our story, and it starts with getting Will back, as it kind of always has, right? Just saying. Okay, now episode 7, the one we've all been waiting for. Okay, the coming out scene was a little fucked. Did I cry? Yes, but I'm very hormonal at the moment, and we don't need to talk about that. But come on, coming out in front of like 7 billion people all at once is just like, I mean, I had a very, very easy coming out experience, and I would never have done anything like that. Someone like Will, poor little closeted kid in the 80s, he's not coming out to his middle school teacher and his best friend's little sister and some chick with superpowers who he's never met. He's not even probably coming out to Hopper. I mean, it was bizarre. I do quite like the idea. I saw someone said like potentially like it was actually just that Will had said to Mike like bring everyone in, and in his mind he was like, yeah, bring in like our friends. But Mike having like no context for the conversation, thinking that it was about like Vecna or whatever, was like, oh, I better get everybody. And then Will being like, fuck, that wasn't what I meant. But I guess we're doing this. I like that idea. That's kind of funny. But like, come on. Noah clearly was not a fan of this. He said in interviews, he's trying really hard to work on that media training to be like, it was great. It was such a great idea. He clearly thought it was stupid. Like, listen to your gay actors, particularly the ones who are playing your characters. Just like, please, really. And then having everyone be like, go like one by one, and my bow, and my axe. I mean, give me strength. Terrible. I think it would have been like much stronger if he had just like come out to Joyce in that scene, and like the Mike walking in moment was him overhearing. And I, or like if he just told the two of them, like if Mike had walked in and he'd been like, I'm going to tell you two actually. Like that would have been great. But I think that the maybe one of the reasons they didn't do that is because if that had happened, it would have been far more likely that they would have had to have the one-on-one conversation of like, so the painting and like this crush that you have, blah blah blah, which I think that they are waiting for the finale to have. But I think that this is the important thing to note is I don't think so, because they've obviously framed this as like Will's coming out. He's done that because like he wanted to make sure that he like got his big secret out of the way so Vecna can't use it against him. I don't think that being gay is his big secret, because you can see he still holds something back, right? He didn't say specifically, and I was in love with Mike. That's the big secret that's going to come out, and I think Vecna's going to use it against him. And yeah, like there was also that parallel between, you know, Mike's like, it's not my fault you don't like girls, and Will saying I don't like girls. I think that's very deliberate. I think that Mike's reaction shows that he like clocked that. And yes. Now, so as I say, I've been seeing people saying, you know, buy the bones and whatever. And I'm like, I don't really get it. I don't really understand, like, why everyone is so sure based on that episode that Byler won't happen. Um, like, I just don't think that there was anything to clearly say that Mike's rejected him. Like I say, I think that Will has self-rejected, and that there's very clearly another conversation that needs to happen before anything can be like put to rest. Whether he's rejected or not, there's still another conversation that needs to happen. You can't just have Mike being like, in reference to him being like he had a crush on someone and that be it. Like that's just, it's not yeah, it's not cohesive, and it's not kind of um yeah, it doesn't feel satisfying or anything. So I just don't think that that will happen. And like also, either Mike is like being weird as fuck again for like no reason, which potentially is a possibility, or there was something else going on. Like I think he very clearly finally figured out. I mean, I wrote these notes before I'd read some of the interviews where the Duffers said like, yes, that was him figuring it out. But I think, yeah, it was clear that he like finally figured out that Will is in love with him, and he's like processing that in real time. Again, I don't think. I mean, some people have been saying like that's why they think Byler isn't going to happen, because that was Will. No, sorry, that was Mike figuring it out. And I'm like, why? Why would that be something that tells you that it's not going to happen? I think that was him going, oh, okay. And then he has to sit and think about that. He's not going to just like process it in 2 seconds and be like, hate that. Um, and then the way that he sort of stood back from the group hug, like he went in, but it looked like he was kind of just like looking at Will and trying to like figure him out a bit. Um, so, which leads me to, as I've said before, I do think that they're going to have a discussion about the crush. I think that they're going to talk about the painting, and I just don't think it will be a rejection. Um, I think, as I said, Vecna as a narrative force targets like secrets and shame. Will's love for Mike is the cleanest unresolved vulnerability left. So I think that that is what is going to be used. And I think that it just doesn't make sense to like, or again, it would be cruel to be like, all right, let's use the gay kid's love for his best friend as the like shame moment from the big bad, and then we'll use that as his way of like, I don't know, trying to make Will break. I I mean, narratively, again, it just makes sense that the discovery would be, you're wrong. Mike does love you back. Because otherwise, what? It's like, you're right and you should be ashamed of it. Like, how is he going to win the day with that? Maybe he dies, and what, we just have like the poor kid who's just suffered from like day one being like, and you were right all along. You should have been ashamed of that. Bye. I just, it would be weird. So I actually think more than ever as well that Mike and Elle broke up in the like period between season 4 and season 5. Um, they don't kiss all season. They refer to each other as friends on multiple occasions. I think that they like kept the breakup quiet because I know that like there is that scene in season episode 1, I think, where maybe Lucas refers to them as like lovebirds or whatever he says. But even like the way that they kind of look at each other in that moment, I think that they just like kind of kept it quiet so no one gets dragged into it because Elle is like, we've got other things to focus on. She's focused on Henry, and Mike is focused on Will. So I personally feel like Elle and Mike are already done. Will and Mike have a lot of unresolved business to finish. And it would not make sense to end the finale with Mike being like, Will, I don't love you and you should be ashamed of yourself. And please be ashamed of being gay. And this sucks for everybody. It's just not going to happen. So this is why, after finishing Volume 2, I am more sure than ever that we are actually going to get a Korosami ending. And personally, I just think no matter what happens, Byler is real. Byler is real. Bye.